Hi, and welcome back to our third session out of 8 for remotely piloted aircraft systems. Tonight we're going to go into more detail on the visual observer. For those who have not perhaps attended in the past, my name is Brenda Wellwood, and I'll be your facilitator for this session. On our agenda today, we're going to be talking about the visual line of sight, or VLOS. What is the role of the visual observer, the duties and responsibilities of the visual observer, and the Transport Canada guidelines for VOs, or visual observers. So let's start off with the visual line of sight, VLOS. So CARS defines VLOS as the unaided visual contact at all times with the RPAS that's sufficient to be able to maintain operational control of the aircraft, know its location, and be able to scan the airspace in which it is operating to detect and avoid other aircrafts or objects. Pilots and visual observers may not use binoculars, telescopes, or zoom lenses to maintain VLOS, but unmagnified night vision devices are permitted for night visual line of sight operations, provided they're able to detect all light within the visual spectrum. And that's out of CARS 901.392. You can have glasses such as sunglasses or prescription glasses. Those are not considered to be aids, and therefore they are permitted. I would suggest that if you are wearing sunglasses, they should be non-polarized, otherwise it will distort the colors that you're looking at. A little more information on the visual observer and their role. In general, their duties and responsibilities. The principal responsibility of the visual observer is to maintain the visual line of sight with the aircraft through all phases of the mission. Maintaining the visual line of sight is a requirement of Transport Canada, and with a visual observer maintaining VLOS, the pilot can then be heads down and fly the RPAS. You could be assigned other duties by the pilot, such things as sight setup, help take sight down, control of curious bystanders. You'll find that when you are involved in an RPAS mission, it does tend to draw people in, and it could be family, friends, or just curious individuals wanting to know what's going on. So one of your roles as a visual observer is to keep an eye on the area around the pilot and keep that area clear so that nobody's bumping into the pilot. General responsibilities. So not only does the visual observer need to know about the scenarios that could impact the flying conditions, so such things as the weather. You should be always kind of scanning the airspace and looking. There could be a squall coming in, perhaps a rainstorm, snowstorm. Understand ground hazards and airborne hazards that could affect the flight mission. You should also be aware of CARS regarding flights over people and other prohibited activities that would support the pilot in command in flying within the bounds of what is legally permissible. We don't want people to be walking out within the area in which we're flying, because we are not permitted to fly over those individuals. So to continue with some of the general responsibilities, as a visual observer, not only do you need to be able to identify issues in the sky, but you need to be able to direct the pilot in command on what action to take to avoid those issues. As a visual observer, you should be constantly scanning the sky and the ground and identifying potential hazards and notifying the pilot in command of those hazards as they arrive. It's crucial for the pilot in command to trust you as the VO's judgment and immediately act upon your advice without question. For this to happen, the pilot in command must trust the VO, and as a VO, you should follow through with that trust, and you should be providing correct and timely information to your pilot. So no pilot shall operate a remotely piloted aircraft or RPAS system if visual observers are used to assist the pilot in the provision of detect and avoid functions, unless reliable and timely communication is maintained between the pilot and each of the visual observers during the operation. There may only be one visual observer, and in that case you may be close enough to the pilot to speak back and forth. If you have a number of visual observers, then you need to have an open air communication in order to talk back and forth, and we would suggest radios for that. A visual observer self-communicate to the pilot in a timely manner during the operation whenever you detect conflicting air traffic or hazards to safety aviation or hazards to the people on the surface or on the ground as well. As a visual observer, you should perform visual observation duties for not more than one remotely piloted aircraft at a time, unless those aircraft are operated in accordance with Section 9014 with a Special Flight Operations Certificate, also known as an SFOC, RPAS issued under Section 90303. Also, as a visual observer, no visual observer shall perform your visual observer duties while operating a moving vehicle. That means driving the moving vehicle, vessel, or aircraft. So taken out of the Transport Canada Aeronautical Information Manual, as of June 1st, 2019, it states that a pilot or visual observer in direct communication with the pilot must maintain the visual line of sight with the drone. At this time, we are not certified for beyond visual line of sight assignments. While the pilot will need to look back and forth from their smart controller or screen to the sky, back to their hands, they may take a quick peek. You as the VO, you can be there always maintaining that line of sight with the RPAS. Ensure that even in those short moments where the pilot must look away, the RPAS is still flying safely. Visual observers are required to be trained in-house and to receive the recurrent training for Transport Canada regulations and updates as necessary for RPAS visual observers. During a flight operation, as a VO, you may receive instructions from the pilot in command and or the search coordinator, but in the event of conflicting instructions, you should listen to your pilot in command and, if necessary, request that the search coordinator or other individuals refrain from speaking to you until your mission is complete. Your focus needs to be on maintaining that visual line of sight with the RPAS at all times and not be distracted by unnecessary conversation. Conducting both the pilot duty and the communication tasks should not be done by the pilot in command. What are some of the inter-crew communication requirements? As a visual observer, you're responsible for providing a see and avoid assistance to the pilot. You need to have immediate and continuous communication with the pilot. Therefore, a mobile phone or a cell phone should not be your primary method of communication with the other team members. If the pilot in command is in communication with ATC, air traffic control, it's recommended that all crew members, and primarily your visual observers, monitor that frequency to improve your situational awareness and navigational awareness while constantly still scanning your flight area. It's important to emphasize that you as a VO, the role that you hold is not a simple role. Just having an untrained observer standing by, watching the RPAS in flight, is not good enough. If someone is performing the role of visual observer, it's important that he or she be properly trained. Just imagine the difference between somebody shouting, "Look out, there's something flying, it's out there somewheres," or somebody calmly telling you, "Bird, 12 o'clock high, it's moving slowly away." Now let's take a look at the VO training itself. Visual observer positioning. Where should you be standing? So the visual observer should be close enough to the pilot in command, but not physically crowding him or her. The pilot in command and the VO should be close enough that they could hear each other clearly, but not so close as they may bump into each other. The visual observer should also be at a close enough distance to the pilot in command to ensure that no one else bumps into the pic. How many visual observers are required? Depending on the area which you're covering and the distance that your visual observers are from each other, So you'd look at, if you look at the terrain, is it uphill, downhill? That also helps to determine the number of visual observers you need. So one visual observer, they can maintain a continuous visual observation of the RPAS to a maximum operating distance plus or minus 500 meters. If you want to go out to 1,000 meters, you would need 2 visual observers. One will stay next to the pilot. The second visual observer will move out to 1,000 meters away. The second visual observer can then look back towards the pilot 500 meters, and they can look beyond 500 meters. So now with 2 visual observers, you're covering a maximum operating distance of 1,500 meters. And so on and so forth. Each one would move out 1,000 meters, and you would place those visual observers so that they would have the best opportunity to keep the RPAS in sight 100% of the time. Scanning techniques. How do you look in the sky in order to properly look for the RPAS and so that we're consistently following a method? It's important to have a procedure in place. So how we're going to scan the sky so that the visual observer just simply isn't gazing around everywhere, but is monitoring the airspace in a systematic manner. We use clock coordinates to help us understand where something is within our space. So the visual observer should keep in mind, regardless of his or her position, the information that you are relaying to the PIC should correspond with the pilot in command's position, not your position as the VO. The clock coordinates should be used for indicating hazards. We use the clock, therefore 12 o'clock would be straight ahead of the pilot, 6 o'clock is immediately behind, 3 o'clock is directly to the right, and 9 o'clock is 90 degrees or directly to your left. And we would use those. So use of the clock coordinates. We'd also use words such as high or low to help us indicate the distance to or from the horizon. So it's important to note both the direction and the speed at which this hazard is moving by saying it's moving away slowly or it could be moving closer rapidly, etc. These descriptors are very important here because they help convey the urgency of the hazard. An object that's moving slowly away is of much less concern than something that is moving rapidly closer to the RPAS. So an example of communicating a location of a potential hazard in the sky could be RPAS, 12 o'clock high, moving closer slowly. That's the pertinent information that you want to relay to the pilot. They can then determine, should I bring the drone down, should I stop it, should I hover, what is my corrective action now that I understand there's another RPAS in the sky, I know where it's at, and I know what direction it's traveling. There is no one technique that's best for all visual observers and pilots. The most important thing is that for each team to develop a scan that is most comfortable and workable for the team. Looking well ahead for weather and pre-planned navigation features can help. Proper scanning requires the constant sharing of attention with other piloting tasks that you may be doing. It's easily degraded by such conditions as distraction, fatigue, boredom, illness, anxiety, or preoccupation. The role of the VO is one where you must stay very focused in order to keep an eye on the RPAS. This is another visual scanning technique that may work for you. Place the RPAS in the center of your field of vision. Looking straight ahead, you will designate that as the 12 o'clock position. Now do a broad horizontal sweep from the left to the right of the RPAS, designating those positions to your left as 9 o'clock and to your far right as 3 o'clock. Now from the 3 o'clock position, do a semicircular arc below the RPAS with your eyes, back to the 9 o'clock position. So you would look down in an arc and up to the 9 o'clock. Now repeat those steps, but go through your positions with an upward arc. So you would start at the 9 o'clock position, you would follow an upward arc around the RPAS back to the 3 o'clock position. Once you have completed that, now recenter your view on the RPAS at 12 o'clock and repeat the process. This should take you about 10 seconds. Remember that your role as the visual observer isn't limited to just keeping an eye on the RPAS. Your role is to ensure the visual line of sight with the RPAS is never broken, as per the requirement of Transport Canada. You're also responsible for identifying hazards in and around the RPAS and pilot's surroundings. That concludes Lesson 3 on the visual observer. Lesson 4 will be the RPAS crew, and in future nights we'll be discussing the spotter, the pilot, the electronic image analyst. Next training session, which will be session number 4, will contain elements of visual interpretation. Thank you.